Join us today for Outokompu. We have Johann from Outokompu as our guest. We'll talk about stainless steel that is sustainable, so therefore stay on. Welcome to Get Hired. My name is Benjamin Weller and I'm one of the co-founders of Hired, the early career network for students and young professionals. Get Hired is a podcast initiated to unwrap and expose the inside information of the professional world. Stay tuned to gain knowledge from our trusted sources. Welcome to our new podcast. We have today a very interesting guest. We have Johann from Outokompu. Welcome to Hired office. We're very happy to have you. Perfect. Johann, can you give us a short overview in like 2-3 sentences? Who are you?
I'm the HR Director, Chief Human Resources Officer of Outokompu, which is the world-leading stainless steel producer, Finnish born Finnish, let me call it like this. Outokumpu is a city in the middle of Finland, which was the first mining place. Since that, we are a stainless steel company with operations in 30 different countries and about 8,500 people. And I'm there since 10 years now.
Well, as I said, it sounds first a bit boring, but stainless steel is basically everywhere.
You will find it everywhere, from cutlery. Look just around in your kitchen and you'll find forks and knives, you'll find your dishwasher, you'll find the tumbling and washing machines and everything. But it's as well broadly in industrial applications like chemical tanks, pipes and tubes. But you'll find it as well in facades, for instance, particularly from skyscrapers. So Chrysler Building, for instance, in New York is our stainless steel, and it has brilliant look and feel, and it doesn't have to be cleaned.
Well, that's actually pretty useful. Maybe you could also develop some stainless steel for cutlery that doesn't have to be cleaned.
It's easy cleanable, and that's basically one of the reasons why it's made out of stainless steel. So when you put it into your dishwasher, then you will not have too many trouble to get it clean again.
You said boring.
You said boring.
Then I didn't mean it that way. Why is stainless steel so exciting?
First of all, it's an extremely fascinating material. So when you just wonder about where you find it, then it's amazing how many different applications you find for stainless steel. But then, and that's what most people do not know, it's one of the most sustainable products in the world. We have a recycling quota of north of 90%. Any other material is normally 50 and less in recycling, but we are producing our stainless steel, about 2.5 million tons every year. Out of 94% of that is scrap, which is collected, which is remelted, and then put into the new process. In that sense, sustainability is the core theme for us, not only through recycling, but equally then there is a certain portion, you can easily count 6 percentage points then of where we need virgin material. And finding the sources, producing these raw materials then in a way that delivers the lowest carbon footprint in the world is actually the theme for us, which is extremely exciting.
Well, you mentioned sustainability is very important to you as a company, and I'm very excited to talk about this, of course. But maybe can we talk quickly about the ingredients of stainless steel? And I think the German name is even more lovely, right? Edelstahl.
The stainless steel, there are different forms, obviously, and different alloying methods, but the basic stainless steel consists of iron ore, obviously, and then there is 18% chromium and 8% nickel, which goes into that. Both chromium and nickel, obviously, in the first glance, it's pretty dangerous raw materials. We are the only stainless steel producer in Europe who has a chromium mine on our own up in the north of Finland, in Kemi, which is the cleanest and most sustainable chromium source you can have in the world. And nickel, obviously, or at least the remainder, which is not coming out of scrap, is then the part which requires particular attention, because 70% of the nickel sources are controlled by Russians and Chinese. Well, difficult, but then they are in many other places which would not necessarily comply with our standards in how we are aiming to produce. Therefore, this is one of the core themes we are looking at.
It's a very interesting point, I think. So, nickel, chrome are only available in a few parts of the world.
Finland is an important source for nickel, by the way.
I didn't know that. I only knew that Caledonia there is, I think, lots of nickel, right?
Yeah, there are different places, Zimbabwe, and so many places where you may wonder how do you do that there. However, there are ways to get that right. Both on one side how you manage your suppliers, but then as well how you develop nickel sources that allow you to comply not just with the environmental part, but equally with social and governance, so ESG then as a whole.
And pricing is also a very important topic there, right? So given that the price of nickel fluctuates quite a bit. I remember when I started my career as a commodity trading banker, there were those days when nickel suddenly doubled in 1 year. Pretty crazy.
Nickel is traded on the London Metal Exchange. It's a commodity metal, therefore, yes, there is a lot of speculation. Nowadays, obviously, for considering the e-vehicles, the battery parts of e-vehicles have a nickel component in there as well. So there is a lot of movement around it. We are trying to mitigate that in many ways, but yes, it's there was a saying earlier which we are trying to overcome, is that actually a stainless steel producer is a metal trader with some production entity to it. Yes, there are some challenges in there, no doubt.
But when talking about stainless steel, so stainless steel and sustainability, there are lots of ingredients you have to manage. You have to manage the sources, you have to manage all the electricity, you have to manage the melting process. This is also super high, energy intensive. Indeed.
We are obviously the melting process as well as the production of ferrochrome in Finland is highly energy intensive. We are the single biggest energy user in Finland, so we are using, I believe, somewhere around 4% of the total energy consumption in Finland goes into us. Therefore, yes, energy is a key topic in all its facets. So from wind through solar through nuclear as well. Mm-hmm. Finland is the country, by the way, who is most positive on nuclear in Europe. But obviously these are topics which require good considerations around how do you manage your energy mix in order to get that right.
And how did you start when did this focus on sustainability start at Outokompu? So was it something that had popped up a few years ago, or has it been something that you have been working on for quite a bit?
No, it's a theme since many years. In different dimensions. We are a Nordic company. By the way, Finland is not part of Scandinavia, just as a small side information. So we are a Nordic company, and there is a DNA on sustainability in the first place, particularly driven in the first place from the social aspects and the governance aspect. But we are, since many years, we are the most sustainable energy or stainless steel producer in the world. Just to give you a feel, our today's CO2 footprint in stainless steel is about 1.6, somewhere there, 1.7 tons of CO2 on a ton of stainless steel. We have committed to these SBTi targets, which are derived from the Paris agreements, and have committed by 2030 to bring that down to levels of, I think, now I don't have the numbers in detail, but somewhere around 1 ton. The industry average is more on a 2.5-3 tons of stainless steel, and when you then look to the most pressing competition which comes out of Asia, then they are in areas of 7 tons of CO2 on a ton of stainless steel. So we are there already, but that's not enough. There is a very clear ambition to bring that down much further. We have just launched a product which we call Circle Green, that is basically on 92% less CO2 than average. So we are somewhere in 300 kilo or so per ton of stainless steel. So there are options, there are opportunities. They are, however, and that's where the fascination really starts, they have to build on new, different technologies, particularly on the input side. So how do we get our nickel? How do we manage our energy? How do we turn our total ferrochromium production into lowest CO2, ideally zero? And that's a scope. So we always talk about scope 3 there as the real challenge. 2 and 3 basically with energy and raw materials, which is the challenge for the coming years. But one which requires a lot of brains and a lot of readiness to try out things.
You mentioned your CO2 footprint per ton is so much lower than of your competitors. Do you think we also need a new honesty in the entire debate in saying, okay, well, if we have the big theme of changing things, however, we are not willing to change, why are we focused on CO2 then in the first place?
I think, there are obviously, this is a very wide discussion which requires changing of behavior basically everywhere. I'm not a big fan of this, we have to come down with our standard, or we have to change everything and live like we lived, I don't know what, 200 years ago. I think there is an enormous potential for innovation, which is actually already on the road. When I look at the political discussion, then I think this underestimates the initiatives and the projects which are already underway. However, and I think that's particularly on the European side, where I think we have maybe the most highest ambition at the moment, then we need to understand that these investments require a return. And as long as it's okay to bring in Asian material or wherever from, with a totally different CO2 footprint and just use it, then we will not move too much. So there are these CBAM initiatives from the European Union. There are a lot of things going on, but I think the core is really about, so we are happy to invest, but there needs to be a return. We are not social welfare, sorry. And it starts building. That's the other component. There are more and more end users who are asking their providers for what's happening, what are you using. So when we look at, for instance, the appliances business, the whole business around the washing machines, etc., then there are more and more customers who are asking for that. We are, by the way, the only ones at the moment who can provide you a full scope 1 to 3 footprint of our material, so we can really tell you what's in there.
Well, it makes perfect sense, right? Because, if it economically doesn't make sense, it will not work, right? So I think it's basically possible to drive a more or less a revolution. However, the basics don't add up. So, well,
it's you can ask what's hen and what's egg. But But I personally believe very strongly that sustainability as a differentiator will become more and more important. And that simply means that we have to push for it. Stainless steel is in the first place a commodity, so basically you cannot differentiate too much at the moment except through price, quality and reliability. But at the point where you are able to offer a premium product because it has a totally different CO2 footprint than what otherwise would be available, then I think there is an opportunity as well to make something out of it. But it requires some support, and it requires as well that the public discussion, which is always calling for industry has to move, that we have to recognize that as well, that the ones who are moving should have the positive effects from that as well.
Well, you can talk a bit about how sustainable steel works in the production of steel.
Yeah, that's now becoming a bit complicated, and I'm not an engineer, so I should not get into details there. But
high level.
Generally speaking, the production process itself is not the key source necessarily of our CO2 footprint. It goes with the energy, obviously. There is one element, particularly in the ferrochrome production, which is that we are using coke in the reduction process, so in the smelting process, and we are currently wondering about substituting that coke with biocoke. So basically using the waste of the sawmills, all the wood dust and everything, in order to produce biocoke, and through that then basically have a circularity in the CO2 usage. And that again then offers many more opportunities, because if you have biocoke, then there are more options what you can derive from it. But it's all territory which is not necessarily our core business in the first place. So we have to wonder, how do we set that up for ourselves? Who are we partnering with? How are we building? IT was always calling that the ecosystem. Nowadays, it's coming over there as well. How do we build an ecosystem that allows to really turn everything which is considered as waste in the first place into something valuable?
How do you keep this spirit of innovation alive? Because it's like a lot of the stuff you mention it sounds like innovation is very deeply rooted in the company.
I mean, the first thing, and I think that is fascinating, is that these topics are releasing an incredible energy in the whole organization. And I remember when we had the first melt of that product I mentioned earlier, that Circle Green, then that was done in Tornio in the north of Finland. And I mean, there are operators in the steel mill, and you can imagine them, they are more the tough guys, but they were totally excited about what we are doing. We're wondering about every single opportunity, what screw can be turned here and there in order to really get that right. So first, there is an incredibly positive or a positive spirit which comes in there. But then, I mean, innovation in stainless steel is not necessarily the driving force in the first place. Stainless steel was invented 100 years ago, or even more now. The last main innovation were duplex steels, which were somewhere in the 30s. And since, I would say, over the last 10-15 years, that was very much a cost game and a continuous improvement game. So we are not necessarily set up for innovation in the first place. But we have the themes, we have the energy, and now we have to build something together that allows us to really create something sustainable as well in the results. And there are new minds needed, there are different perspectives needed, and that's what we're currently working on.
So you mentioned before you're very strong in Finland as a Finnish company, but you also have operations here in Germany, in Krefeld. Can you talk a bit about where are you located?
So we are first the market leader in Europe, and we are the strong number 2 in the US. So these are our 2 core markets. We have basically 5. So out of the 8,500 people I was mentioning earlier, we have 5 countries that are in a range of 1,000 plus. So Finland is the biggest country with some 2,500 people. Then we have Sweden with places Avesta, Degerfors, and Nibi that is in a range of some 1,500. In Germany we have the 2 main sites, Krefeld and Dillenburg, and then a few service centers through Germany, which is then about 1,800 or so, 1,900. Dahlbrück, sorry, Dahlbrück, I shouldn't miss you guys. So that's the 3 big Europeans in that sense, and then we have 1,000 people each in Calvert, Alabama. That's next to Mobile in the very south, and about 1,000 people in Mexico in San Luis Potosí. The challenging but at the same time interesting thing is that steel production usually doesn't happen in A locations. So sitting here in your office in the middle of West End in Frankfurt, nice. We are usually sitting in places that are pretty remote, which has advantages and disadvantages. Obviously, advantage is that we tend to be the biggest or one of the biggest employers in the places where we are. So we have, although not many know us really, but in the places where we are operating, we are known, and we have a very strong emotional attachment as well of our people. In many ways, we are a bit family employer over generations. The challenge, obviously, is that such setups potentially lead to a bit of a closed culture in the various places, and bringing in people from abroad is difficult. So if I asked you to go to Tornio for an expat stint, then, well, it's a challenging place firsthand because it's half year dark, half year light, and it easily has 40 degrees minus during winters. Yeah, it's basically polar circle. We're not far away from it. And there is not much infrastructure for families, for instance, to go there from international schools or anything like this. So, but we have people there, and there are adventurers who are going there. Maybe not for a lifetime, but for 2-3 years. That's definitely an experience which you can count.
It's super interesting. And can you talk a bit about what are the trends you're working on at the moment for the next 5 to 10 years? What do you think will be big? First in stainless steel, but also in your company.
We basically touched on most of them. Innovation and how do we organize innovation is a core topic with, I think, different perspectives. One is the upstream, so the whole raw material energy space that we were already touching. The second one is then around managing investment projects, bigger style investment projects, which we were not necessarily used to over the last few years. But when we look into the various innovation topics, then that will be much more of a topic. And the third bucket is really then around what I would call new business. So wondering about what applications can a material that is much more sustainable than many others, left and right from more from the be it aluminium, be it other materials. How can we open new options and opportunities for stainless steel? So that's one big scope. The second one is, and it's a bit, how do I modernize, or how do we build a company and a reputation as well of the company, which is leaving this pretty this steel cliche? When you wonder about the steel company, then you are most probably wondering about I don't know, in former times you were wondering about old white men with 6 cigars who were taking decisions. I mean, that's long time ago. So we were basically, we used the COVID period very much to establish totally new ways of collaboration. Good, we have 6,000 people who need to produce stainless steel, so you will not do that remotely, actually. And on top of that, you have engineers who need to be on the shop floor and who cannot just sit on the computer. So, but we found a lot of ways how to work. We are strongly working on diversifying our workforce. I mean, again, this is a man's industry in the first place.
No surprise.
So particularly on the shop floor, I think we have 94% of our operators on the shop floor are men. But this is no more a physical job where you would wonder that you have to lift heavy weights, you know. I was asking one of our union guys a couple of weeks ago, when actually did we have to pre or early retire people, the last one for a physical disease? And he started wondering and didn't come to, oh, that's a long time ago. So the question, how can we make that much more attractive for female, for young engineers, for as well operators who come in there, is a key topic. And then, of course, I mean, we are not doing that only because we feel we should do that. There is a labor market which is extremely challenging. And for me, diversity in the first place means I need to have access to all the different talent markets which are there. And if I want that, then we have to be inclusive for all different types of people. Whoever you are, you should feel comfortable working for us. When I, for instance, look to Europe, then I would think that it's not just a gender topic, there is a strong migration topic as well in Europe, which we need to wonder. I mean, in Krefeld we have 30 different nationalities who are working for us, so it is much more diverse than you would imagine. So, and on diversity, just to mention that as well, obviously we have, particularly when we then look to the US and the fact that we are in Alabama, we have obviously specific topics then in the various places which we aim to deal with and work with.
And very fascinating. And Johann, can you tell me a bit about you? So what have you done before you joined and became CHRO?
I just had 32 years now. I'm in a way I'm an HR lifetimer, although I never considered myself really as HR in that sense. I started not far away here from in Commerzbank actually as an HR trainee after I did my master's in economics. Then ended up in consulting very quickly. Went through very focus on compensation benefits, and then went on a journey through different industries. I was the group compensation benefits manager at Airbus when Airbus was formed. So basically from 1999 to 2002. Integrating French, German, Spanish, British parts into one company. Then I moved on to specialty chemicals, was in Switzerland at Clariant for a number of years. Got into the HR director role more or less accidentally. There was nobody else, so then you'll do the job. So that was, and I was 36 or so when I became the HR director of a 25,000 people company that was at that time in massive economic trouble. So a lot of restructuring there. Then went back into consulting, actually worked for a consulting firm in Zurich, Humatica, with a totally new experience because they were much more into private equity situations, culture changes, etc. in a private equity takeover for much smaller firms, so more 100, 500 people, so extremely interesting experience. And then I was hired into Outokumpu at the time when Finnish Outokumpu took over ThyssenKrupp Steel. or stainless steel in Germany and the US. And I was at that time, 2013, hired a bit as the neutral German in Helsinki, who should take care of the integration, which I think was a super interesting experience. Took us a while. We had a number of pretty tough years. We have to admit that the pandemic gave us an incredible opportunity, because with the breakdown of all supply chains, the import topic didn't work out anymore. So we had two exceptionally good years in 21 and 22, which allow us now as well to be in a position to really drive sustainability forward. And I've been HR. I had a number of different additional responsibilities. Was at times for a couple of years in charge of IT, and nowadays I'm in charge of communications and brand as well.
Moving from banking to consulting to chemicals to raw materials / industrial. So your journey has been quite diverse as well, right? So
yeah, I have to admit, I learned fairly early in my career that I'm an industrial man. So I mean, on one side you can say there are people everywhere, and people usually deliver a people agenda which is fairly similar. But I find it extremely fascinating to see products being invented, being produced, being sold, and have something tangible which you can relate to. Therefore, yeah, there was a services period in my life, but be it chemicals, be it aircrafts, be it now stainless steel is what really fascinates me.
So, since you have been around for quite some time in the HR space, how have things changed? So 20 years ago, nobody was talking about labor shortage. Nowadays, this is the overreaching topic.
I have to admit, obviously, that the market environments we are operating in, as well, maybe a bit the social discussions which we are dealing with, and derived from that, the expectations people are bringing to the job have changed. But when I look at the 30 years agenda, I'm wondering, has so much really changed? The themes are still there. I have to admit, I still see and hear when talking or when observing the scene that HR is struggling with the same topics they ever had in decades. And I was always trying to disconnect a bit from that, because when I just sit back and say, so what's our role? Then I would say a CEO has basically two parts of his brain, or has two things in her or his hands, which is money from the investors and people. And that's two things you need to combine in a way that you are creating value. So therefore, I'm HR, we are in charge of the people side. And that means, in the first place, we have to find the right people, we have the right in quantities and in qualities, and we have to organize the company in a way that these people can really connect and collaborate in a way that we create value. That's our first job. And that's what I would consider as the permanent strategic agenda. That, however, means that I have to be a part of the inner circle of a company discussion, and I have to say I was privileged to have that with, well, I'm just counting 1, 2, 3, 5 or 6 CEOs in my career who were actually living that. And then I have to say my role is threefold as a law director. I need to run an organization, and that organization needs to deliver very reliably on fundamental services. If the payroll was not working, I will not have a seat at the strategic table. People will tell me, hey, go off and make it happen. So it's basically making that sound foundation, which is absolutely fundamental for everything we are doing. The other one is then really to be the sounding partner of a CEO. And let's face it, CEOs are pretty lonely people. They don't have so many to talk to. And usually, I think it's the CFO and the CHRO who are the ones who are in the closest discussion. And then we have to convert that into conceptual approaches that really create value. What I'm observing, and no offense to anybody, but I sense that we are not often enough part of these strategic discussions, as HR generally now broadly seen, that leads to conceptual work which is, in my eyes, every now and then a bit detached from reality. Or we are considering important side aspects to be the main thing. And as much as I believe in diversity, equity, inclusion, as much as I believe that we as employer have to wonder about how can we support mental health, how can we support development, these are foundations. They are not why we are there, they build the foundation for us being able to create value. And I think we have still a long journey to go to change our language from here are great things, what can we use them for, towards here are the business challenges and how do we take them to solutions and value creation.
Well, how have you changed? So over the years, so you have been working pretty internationally. So starting in Germany, then working in Switzerland, now a lot in Finland and Germany. So how has it changed you? And what's your advice to young people how to start and pursue an international career?
I mean, if I take the first point, how have I changed? I remember a fierce discussion with my first boss, or one of my first bosses, Jörg Stolzenburg, here in Frankfurt, where I was totally denying the value of experience. And I was 27, 28 or so, basically saying either you are a brain and you know what you are aiming for, or forget about it. 30 years down the road, I would say, well, experience helps a lot. If you don't say, well, see it, been there, this is how it works, but it just helps you, particularly in HR, to understand certain dynamics in what's going on, and it allows you as well to stay a bit in the background. So I was always talking about, I'm not an alpha animal, I don't want to be on stage. I love to be in the back of the room and listen to what the guy says there, and actually I wrote it. So that's I think where I developed in becoming more of take yourself back, put the leaders into the center, because they are ultimately the ones who need to deliver. Now, that's how I would think I changed. At the same time, the first thing I need to tell everybody who is pursuing an international career is don't plan it. 80 to 90% of what I've seen in my 30 years were pretty accidental, I would say. However, and I think there is, what's that saying? Luck is when opportunity meets preparation. I think there is a certain element you need to be curious. You need to have the courage to take risk. You should not, and that's what I'm telling all our young guys when they come into the company, don't sit at your desk and wait that somebody from HR comes by and develops you. That will never happen. Or it may happen, but then it's accidental as well. So you are the master of your destiny. And that requires, on one side, aim for creating a footprint. Jumping every half year is not great, because maybe that works for a while, but the question, what are you really creating yourself, is an element. And the second one is then, well, try it out. And the third one, maybe, and that's more now being a father of three boys who are young men, meanwhile, who are at that point, hey, discuss with your partners around your joint agenda. I'm always surprised how couples are getting into trouble when an opportunity is there. For one, because of course when we went to Finland, then my wife had to say, well, I mean that means I have to cut back my ambitions. And I believe that you can live, it's your life, guys. Set your priorities together, and it can be any way, but it needs to be discussed up front, or on a regular basis, because life is changing and priorities are changing. But just have an understanding of what risk are you ready to take, and what does that mean for your family and for your partner.
So you mentioned that it's very, very hard to plan. Hasn't anything...
You shouldn't plan, because the more you plan, the more you miss opportunities.
Exactly right. So, and in the end, it won't turn out that way. So has there been anything you'd say, well, with the benefit of hindsight, well, that wasn't such a great move, and perhaps I already anticipated it not being great, but, well, in the end, okay, it's a learning opportunity.
I mean, you can obviously regularly wonder, particularly when you are in a big company, is sit and wait better than move? I have to admit, I was always more on the impatient moving side. When I wander back I was in Airbus, I was in an extremely successful and growing company. I could have stayed there, and most probably I would have had my career. Fine. In hindsight, you could wonder, was that the right move? But it's not relevant, because you take your decisions and then you deal with it. If I was constantly wondering about what should I have done, then the next 5 years are relevant, not the last 5 years. And therefore, patience is an element which every now and then helps. However, patience and say inactivity are sometimes difficult to separate from each other.
Perfect. Can you tell us a bit about who are you looking for at Outokompu in Germany, in Finland? So who should join?
I mean, in the first place, I have to say we are not looking for people in Germany, in Finland, or anywhere. We are looking for people for Outokompu. And obviously, we are a very engineering-driven organization. In that sense, the first focus is very much on people who bring the technologies, who bring the insights. Metallurgists are the center of what we are doing logically when we are producing steel, but increasingly it's as well around chemists, around which is, some say metallurgy is anywhere part of chemistry, but it's going broader nowadays, just recalling what we discussed earlier on raw materials. So I'm looking, or we are looking for people who have a very sound foundation in their field, but then who have these elements I mentioned earlier. Be curious, be constantly aiming to learn, be courageous, ready to take risks, not just for your personal career, but equally we need in certain areas nowadays to learn to fail fast as well. An engineer is not necessarily of that mindset usually, because they want to have things right and then it shall work. We need a bit more agility in certain areas. So that's one area. The other area, which is obviously bursting at the moment as well, is the whole topic around data sciences, around using what we have in our hands to be much more analytical, and then wondering about what role could artificial intelligence play in our setup in many dimensions, from new customer services to more or less highly automized overhead processes and services. So that's the two main areas which we are after. But ultimately, I would always say we are looking for personalities, because where you are starting is definitely not where you are ending your career. And being up for a journey and being ready for even taking turns in that journey which you would not have thought about in the first place is something we would appreciate a lot.
Perfect. Johann, thank you so much for all the insights. Sustainable stainless steel, super interesting topic. Remarkable numbers you mentioned. So it's impressive. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
It was very cool talking to you.
It was a pleasure.
Great. And you guys, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We have, of course, have everything linked in the descriptions below. Thanks, and see you next time. Bye-bye.